How is that thing going?
All
right. Hi. So we continue our conversation from where we left off. Sorry, I'm 3 minutes late. I was in the middle of something. All right. We'll compensate for the lost time. So I'm just going to, this has become second nature now. I'm just going to ask if people have any specific questions with regards to what we've looked at so far. Also, I've switched ISPs. I'm experimenting with the new ISP. I hope this connection is going to be stable enough. If you notice something a bit iffy with my connection, just please do let me know. Right, just see if we can start now. Any questions? No questions, okay. Can you hear me though?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right,
Yes, we can get it.
All right, so we got to a stage where we're looking at, thank you for confirming. We were looking at just some simple, very basic examples to try and highlight so-called characteristics of files. Specifically, we're calling these characteristics metadata, right? So meta information about the files. And we did mention that our focus was on more generic features that transcend different types of operating systems. Suffice to say that depending on the type of operating system that you're using, it's entirely possible that you might have a file being associated with different types of let me just shut this down, different types of characteristics, right, or metadata elements. And fundamentally, I mean, the so-called metadata elements would typically be linked to things like so the type of the file. In certain instances, like some variations of Linux-like operating systems, like Ubuntu, you have things like comments, or for instance, these are like annotations anyway. All right, so on with it, I suppose. And really broadly speaking, these characteristics could be viewed as being either descriptive metadata, right, structural or administrative metadata, right? So metadata or characteristics that are associated with permissions, right? Metadata elements that are specific to the structure of the document, right? Document structure. Metadata elements that will help provide more descriptive information about so let's structure metadata here, about the file itself, right? All right, so it turns out that these so-called files, right, folders and regular files, just pause for a little while. Some very important person by Zambian standard, I suppose, just sent a text message, and I know the sort of person that require me to send a response. They can, I guess you're more important, I suppose. Sorry about that. I'm sure they'll understand. We shall explain that we're dealing with more important people, our clients, right? Okay, so it turns out that you have to think about what we're talking about. Again, you want to think about what we're talking about in this lecture series from the perspective of why. Why do you want to persistently store data, right? It turns out that irrespective of the reason that you have for wanting to store data over a long period of time, 100 years, 1,000 years, right? Maybe you want your great-grandchildren to be able to see photos of you, right? Vintage photos or something, for whatever reason, anyway. It turns out that there are certain operations that you might want to perform on the files, right? And there's a broad spectrum of operations. This is intuitive. We know that, I guess most of you know already about these operations, but we're just gonna walk through these operations so that we have a firm sense of these operations that we perform on files, right? So regular files and folders. You typically want to create files, right? You would want to read files, so you want to open the file, right? So it's open operation. You might want to duplicate copies of that file, right? So that maybe you spread them across on the file system, right? You store them on different locations of the file systems, of your file system as a backup mechanism of sorts. You might also want to perhaps move a file, right? So you would probably not be so happy with the fact that your file is located on your desktop because your desktop is too cluttered. So you want to move it to a different logical location in your file system, right? So you typically move it, right? Cut and paste or something. You might want to make changes to the file, to an existing file, right? So change the bit representation of the file or remove some bits, right? In which case you'd be editing. You might want to change the unique identifier of your file, right? So you're not too happy with the name of the file because maybe it has spaces, and you realize it's a bad idea, very, very bad idea to use a space in the file name. Nobody does that. You realize that, you wake up and you have an epiphany or something, and then you rename the file, right? So you change the unique identifier of the file. You might also want to get rid of the file, so delete it from the file system, right? So very basic operations. It's probably more operations, but these are the most common ones. So all you're doing when you're creating a file for the first time is you're essentially specifying the actual bits or the contents that you'd want to store in that particular file, right? The ones and zeros. And obviously we know by now, or if we don't know now, we know that you'd need to use a specific application software for you to create or for you to add content to a file, for you to create a new file. Right? You just don't create a PDF encoded file, right? It needs to be created in a certain way. You use an application. A common technique is to use most widely used applications like your word processor, right? Your word processor will typically have a feature, yeah, a feature that allows you to encode, yeah. This is some random example, right? We're gonna save this random example into our home directory. Just is some random example. Do not use spaces, right? Example. We save this for us to be able to encode this into PDF, to create a new file that encodes data is in PDF format. We need to use application software. And in this case, I'm just using my word processor. It has a feature that allows me to encode, right, to export the current document as PDF, right? So I have created a new file. And you notice by default, because by convention, a PDF file has a PDF extension, right? My application software knows that every time I export this as PDF, it will automatically assign this extension here, .pdf. Right? It will even show me the file format here, right? And this cuts across different places like observe, even cloud-based software, right? Like our so-called G Suite that we use. So if you are writing your assignments using, and I do encourage you to do this, let's say you are creating your assignment using Google Docs, right? Or in some random course that you're doing, you're required to prepare presentations. Hopefully you're doing this in 1020, right? As you are working through as you're working through the so-called productivity tools. I'm sure you've been introduced to cloud-based software tools like Google Docs and Google Slides and all the good stuff, right? Google Sheets and whatnot. Turns out that you can encode files in the same way, right? So this has a feature, file download. I tell it when I'm downloading here, I'm in the background, I'm just telling it to say, create a new file and encode it in PDF format. And then the downloaded file that I'm going to get is going to be in PDF. Come on, it's not coming. I can do the same. Oh, it's here, it's coming. I can do the same thing. Go to file. I tell it, create a new file and encode it in Microsoft Word, right? .docx. It will do that in this, and what I get back is like a file that's encoded in. I don't know if you can see the status bar here, right at the bottom of my browser here. Do fancy things like I can also tell it to say I want to not rich text file, I suppose. Oh, I can open document format, right? Because I want to open it in Open Office or LibreOffice or something, right? What I'm doing is I'm telling the software that I'm using, the application software, in this case, Google Docs, to say, can you create a new file and encode it in this format? Yeah. It gets even better. I mean, for presentation slides, if you're using Google Slides, for instance, you can tell Google Slides to say, I want you to, can you just export the first page and encode it in PNG, right? I want this to be an image, and it will give you back a PNG file. Boom, right? So you need, the key thing here is you need application software to be able to do this. And as you are creating this new file, what your operating system will expect you to do is, at a very bare minimum, is it will expect you to supply the file name. You must specify the file name. This is what it expects. Another way of looking at this is that the very basic, one of the, I guess, a mandatory metadata element that you must supply, mandatory characteristic that you must supply when you're creating a new file, is the unique identifier, which is the name. Some of these other things are automatically created for you, right? So you notice that when we created this new file here, if we check the properties, things like timestamps, like the date when it was created, when it was last accessed, these are automatically generated for you. The permissions, default permissions are being used here. The owner has read-write access. The group that the user created this file belongs to has also read-write access. Everybody else on the computer only has read access, right? At the bare minimum, all of these things will be created for you by default, right? And the location obviously is inferred, right? Because you implicitly specify where exactly you're going to create this file. As you're creating the file, save as or export, when you say export, you implicitly, there's a default location that's specified, but you can also explicitly tell it where exactly you want this file to be saved. Anyways, I don't know if this is making sense. So actually, at the bare minimum, it's the name and the location. Although there's a default location that is specified for you. So that's creating a new file, right? Opening up a new file is obviously, it's obvious you want to do that for you to be able to consume the contents of the file, right? Typically, when you want to read or if you want to edit the file or to delete some bits associated with that file, you'd need to open it first, right? Either implicitly or explicitly, right? Again, you need application software for you to be able to open the file. Otherwise, how are you going to open it, right? Because it turns out that, think about this for a second. If you think about this from the perspective of the high-level functioning von Neumann architecture, and specifically the fetch, decode, execute cycle, you notice that what you're doing when you're opening a file is you're consuming, you're wanting to either read or manipulate data. For you to manipulate data, you need instructions that are going to help you with the manipulation or the reading of the data, right? So effectively what's happening behind the scenes when you open a file is you're going through that loop, fetch, decode, execute cycle. You need an application software that's going to facilitate that fetch, decode, execute cycle. So as you're looping through the fetch, decode, execute, optionally store cycle, is instructions are manipulating the data that you're interested in consuming. And in fact, this is the essence of a computer, right? We use a computer for us to be able to transform data, to collect data and transform it so that we get back information. Everything you do on a computer system is centered around or revolves around data. This is what we're doing. I'm updating my Facebook status. Your status is data, right? I'm writing an assignment using Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word is just a means to an end. You're creating something, new bits, right? I'm making changes because there's a typo in my assignment, right? Whatever. I don't know if this is making sense. But it turns out that you just don't randomly use any sort of application. It has to be the appropriate application. An application that is able to understand the encoded data in that particular file. For instance, you just don't randomly use any application for you to consume video files. For you to play back a video, you must use a video application, VLC, right? QuickTime. I don't know if it's still there. We used to use a lot of QuickTime back in the day, right? There are a number of applications to use out there. You just have to choose which one you want to use, right? The key thing here is you need to make use of a specialized application. And so this idea of specialized applications really is, so there's different ways of looking at this. On the one hand, when you install an operating system for the first time, usually certain file formats or certain extensions are configured to be opened with applications that have already been installed on your operating system, right? So if a novice user is given a brand new computer for the first time, they don't have to worry about, oh my God, what type of application am I going to use? All they'll do is you send them a file, they will double click it. When they double click it, what your operating system does is it uses the default application that has been associated with that file extension. And the default application is what is normally associated with this icon. So you look at this icon and you know that the icon is normally associated with, if you look at open with, Ocular, right? So in my case, every time I double click an application, a PDF, so every time I double click a PDF document, Ocular will be used to open that file for the first time, right? But I can tell it to say, I want to use a different type of application for whatever reason. I want to open my PDF document using my browser. Who does that? Well, I just did, I don't know, right? It happens. Why do you not like following instructions? Why can't you just use your UNZA assigned email address, right? Quite sad. A GIF file, in my case, or GIF, depending on where you're coming from. You see all my GIF files or my GIF files are automatically opened using GwenView, right? So I get to see GwenView there. Okay. Is this making sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great stuff. Right, so in certain instances, you might want to duplicate files, right? So create the same version of the file, a replica of an already existing file, with the hopes that maybe you want to transmit it to somebody else across the network, across a computer network, or perhaps you might want to, like I said earlier, back it up on a different location of the file system. Do I do this a lot myself? Do I? I think I do. I don't know. I think I do though. I'll normally have certain locations on my file system, right? Where there are certain files that I have duplicated on my file system. I'm just going to go to my work directory, I guess. I hope this works. I guess 2019 would be a good idea. But if I go to ICT 1110, wow, I don't know. I don't have this. I thought I did. I have this in 2020 or something. I don't know. Oh, maybe I have this in here. No, I don't. Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to showcase that there are certain instances, like I have, I'll normally, I have certain locations where I will store work-related things, but also what I increasingly do is I have a separate location that's synchronized with Dropbox, right? Where I dump, so it will be this location here, where I'll dump, where everything that I dump in here is synchronized to my Dropbox account, right? So at any given point in time, I'll probably have duplicate files scattered around my file system. Same contents, right? And I do that just to back up my files. It's a cheap trick that I use to back up files anyway. So copy files, right? On certain operating systems like on Ubuntu, you can also copy permissions if you want to. Not that this is important. So this is, you can copy metadata elements from an existing file. And in this particular case, specifically, it would be like administrative metadata, right? So if you have a file that's located on some certain part of your file system, and it's been created in such a way that only a predefined set of users has access to that file, the next time you create a file which should have similar permissions, all you can do is you can copy across the permissions, right? So essentially what you're doing is it's a quick way of quickly copying across characteristics of an already existing file. Right? Very common when this will pop up a lot once you start, I guess, once you start installing these fancy tools in 3010, I think, when you're doing web development or something, I don't know. It turns out that permissions become extremely important, right? When you're working with tools like Apache, for instance, web servers and whatnot. So a cheap trick that I use myself is every time I install an application that I want to serve, let's say, let me just show you an example here, right? Maybe this will work better if I show you an example. Every time I, wow, it's not working out, is it? So every time I have a web server running on my computer, right? And I hope it's running right now. So, come on. I have a web server running on my computer, which I'll access using localhost, obviously, right? If I go to localhost, I have Apache running on my computer. And what I can do, I hope Project Q, is it called Project? I don't know what Project Q is here. Project Q. Whatever this is, anyway. So every time I want to, and this will probably, it will work, I suppose, but, okay, let me just, ICT 1110 test.html or something. So what I just want to do here is just to kind of showcase something. You just don't just play along, I suppose. I don't know. Just quickly do something here to. Okay. So every time I'm deploying a web application, for instance, I guess once I create created a web application, for instance, or a website, whatever I want to call it, and I want to copy it across or deploy it to my web server. It needs, for people to be able to access that site, it needs to be configured with certain permissions, right? This is just some random example. So it's usually configured in a certain way, right? So I'll copy this across. Observe. I hope this will work. Let's try and see if it won't work first, HTML. And then I'll copy it to here, right? Okay. Permissions, right? Permissions here, so I'll need to sudo this, I guess. Okay. So the file is called this, right? So every time I deploy an application and I want to view it or something, I hope, okay, this is working. There are certain instances when users will not be able to access certain parts of your web application when you're accessing it, in which case you need to change permissions. And the way I change permissions, the cheap trick I use is I just copy across the permissions, right? Don't worry about the commands here, but I will use an already existing, and this is a horrible example because the already existing file here has the same permissions as what I've just created here. But I'll typically change permissions, right? Let's just assume, observe, just assume that, yes, just assume that, come on, copy this to x.html or something. Just assume that we have change mode. We have this file, right? I have this file, ICT 1110 underbar test.html, yeah? And then this file has, let's just give it really nice permission, 777 here. Okay, sudo. What you notice here, if you were to check the permissions, what you notice immediately is that this file here, right? The permissions, look at this, just look at the pattern here that I've highlighted here. Hyphen, RX, RWX, 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 right? So regular file and then read, write, execute, read, write, execute for the owner, read, write, execute for the group, read, write, execute for everybody else in the file system. Now, if assuming I've created another file, which is in the same location, and I want it to have the same permissions as this file, what I can do, what I'm trying to say about copying permissions is what I can do is I can copy permissions from this file, right? Rather than, of course, another thing I could do is I could just change the permissions direct from this file by issuing the same command, right? Change mode 777, whatever. But also what I can do is I can say, I can just reference, right? I can reference this file and then map on the permissions here so that, and I need to do sudo, I know this, so that now you'll notice that the permissions are the same. The pattern here is the same as here, right? So you can copy across the permissions. And perhaps you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, why copy permissions? Why not just directly change? Why not just directly change the permissions? It turns out that sometimes you have to be very careful about how you're specifying permissions to the files, right? And if somewhere down the line, it's a month or even years down the line, you want to make sure that the permissions of the newly created file are the same as the files that were created a couple of years back, a couple of months back, instead of redoing this again, can I just, another important person, I'm so sorry, can I just pick up this phone call? This is weird. Hi, Dean. Yes, one. Sorry about that. So somewhere I was talking about the scenario where you might want to copy across the permissions, right? Somewhere down the line, right? Instead of you trying to go back and trying to remember, oh, but what did I do there? What you can do is you can just copy across the permissions, right? So you can copy across the permissions. But key thing about copying, the copying operation is that because the name of the file is unique to its current location, you cannot duplicate it in the same location. It's not possible, right? So observe, if I go here and use my file manager to say, well, I'm this enthusiastic person and I'm like, I want to create this, I want to duplicate this file. So I've just copied it, right? Copy, and then I'll say paste. What we're saying is I cannot, you know, notice that it's the thing, the continue thing, the okay thing is even disabled, right? It's disabled because I cannot have the same file name, right? It's only enabled once I change the name of the file. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. And of course, I mean, we need application software.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
do you mind illustrating the copying of the permissions using your file manager rather than using the terminal?
Well, I mind because I don't think there's a way using at least my graphical user interface. There's no way of copying permissions using my file manager. If there is, then I don't know about that. So it's not. I don't think it's, unless if it turns out that there's a broad spectrum of file managers out there. I'm sure you might be able to come across a sophisticated file manager that is able to copy permissions, right? I wouldn't be surprised, because all you're doing is just mimicking the functionality of change mode here, right? Change mode. If you can do this on the terminal, you can do this on the GUI. But I guess the GUI is normally meant for novice users, right? That's like copying of permissions by a novice user is something that's unheard of. I mean, very few novice users would be interested in even copying permissions for what, right? Probably would look at you strange here. Oh, I cannot illustrate, sir, because I don't think that it's possible, at least not for Dolphin. All right, so so again, for you to be able to copy across this file, right, duplicate it, you need application. No, you need system software. Well, in certain instances, application software, right? I'm saying system software here is because it turns out that your file manager will typically have a feature that allows you to perform these file operations. Why, you ask? Why? Well, because the file manager is there to facilitate that core, one of the core functionalities of the operating system, file management. All of these operations that we're talking about are to do with file management, right? So So you can either use application software, like nice commands like CP command on the terminal, or you can use your file manager, right? Come here and you just right click and you copy, right? And this is, the right click and copy is probably something that is, it transcends all these different operating systems. I'm sure Windows still has right click and copy. I don't know, maybe things have changed. Does Android have control and copy though? What do you do in Android? Let's pause for a little and hear what people do on Android. You long press, right? Do you long
Yes.
press? You long
Yes, sir.
press, right? Yeah, you
Yes.
long press.
You
Yes,
don't
sir.
press or
press.
you mark the particular
Yes, sir.
file you want to copy.
Right. It's good stuff. So we know these things, right? Yeah. So you can long press, or you can mark it as somebody said, right? Once you select it, you contextualize it. Usually, now I don't know what sort of file manager you guys use. I've been using my tried and tested Astro, right? It's been my very best friend for quite some time. Astro File Manager, I use a free version, obviously. I quite like it because I can integrate it with these cloud-based storage services that I use. So using Astro, I link my mobile device with Dropbox, with Google Drive, with OneDrive as well, so that I can easily synchronize the stuff that I have on my phone in these different locations. I find it useful. Yes, sir.
Is it available for all Android mobile devices or specifically for 3T?
It's Astro is on the Play Store, so it's an Android app. So it doesn't matter if you have a Huawei or if you have a Samsung or a OnePlus 3T. I don't know what Google phones are out there now, but it doesn't matter. It's an Android phone, so you can pretty much you can download it for whatever version of Android. It's an Android app. I do encourage you to look into it. I had this she was not my friend, a colleague when I was a student, right? A colleague, yes. She introduced us when I think we were in second year or third year or something. Is it Midnight Commander? It was the in thing then, because there weren't really a lot of file managers for Windows back in the day, right? But now the internet is flooded with file managers, right? In fact, even the Play Store is flooded with file managers. If you go to the Play Store and just check for file manager, you'll find a whole lot of them, right? And you just take a peek anyway. Right, so I was talking about Midnight Commander because it turns out that there's now an Android app. Last time I checked, I think there was an Android app for Midnight Commander also. So you want to experiment with some of these things. Some of them have very nifty features like, I don't know if it is Midnight Command or something, where you can actually even, you can even connect to an FTP server, for instance, right? This is quite nice, very useful. File manager, I guess. I don't know. I was trying to, I just searched for file manager in the Play Store. The first hit, which is an advert, there's an application called File Manager. There's File Manager, no ads, EA. There's Files by Google. Oh, this is, I guess the vast majority of you probably use the default Files, right, by Google, if you're using the most up-to-date version of Google or something. I don't know how better Astro is in comparison to Files by Google or something, which is, do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you don't. I don't know. Let's see if we can. I'm just going to let's do a simple demonstration of sorts here, so that we're on the same page. There's 26 of us here. Quite sad, but let's see if we can just quickly. I'm just going to unshare my screen right now, and then share the other screen that I have there. Right. Okay, so that you see what I'm seeing. I'm just going to stop sharing this, and then I'll start sharing my. All right, so I'm going to share my, sorry about that. I'm just going to share my screen on my Android device. Echo, right? Echo. All right, so what I was talking about here is that, I mean, there's a whole bunch of, what the hell is that? There's a whole bunch of file managers. I'm just going to showcase, I love Astro myself. The thing for me is that, so this is the Astro I'm talking about. I don't know if you can see the Astro here. I just clicked on it. The thing with Astro, right, is that I think one of the reasons why I use it is because I've been using it for a very long time, and so I've become very familiar with it. So it's not like it's a best of breeds out there. There's likely a whole bunch of other things. This is what I was talking about here. If you look at storage locations here, notice that I have access to my internal storage there, and then you see the Dropbox icon. I can add other nifty cloud-based services, and we'll talk about cloud storage very, very soon. We'll probably start doing that next week. Oh, there we go. If you notice here, there's FTP. I can connect to a Samba server, right, SMB server. I can connect OneDrive. I've never used the Yandex disk myself, but I can also connect to my Google Drive, right, which is quite nice. Something else I was saying is that this is not necessarily the only application. You just go to the Play Store and you issue a search for File Manager. Notice that there's a whole host of applications here, right? I do encourage you. The reason I'm doing this is File Commander. Okay, the reason I'm doing this is what I'm trying to say implicitly is that you want to experiment with some of these things. Oh, Total Commander, there we go. It's not Midnight Commander, but maybe it's similar anyway. You want to get to a stage where you're able to experiment with these different types of software packages, so that you have a few, so that you put to practice some of these things we're talking about, right? And hopefully be able to experiment with some of these operations we're talking about, right? Copying files, duplicating files, and using your file manager features to create new files or something, right? I don't know. That's kind of nifty. But yeah, so file managers, right? I'm just going to disconnect from this thing now. I'll just stop that and then I'll exit. All right, great. Okay, so copying of files, and copying is, I mean, copying is usually, it's done in so many different ways. It's such an important copying of a file is such an important operation that in some instances, aside from your file manager, you will find it manifest itself in one of these popular packages or applications that you use, right? I'm sure you've noticed in Microsoft Word or whatever that you have a file, save a copy, right? So you can save a copy, you're copying the file. File, save as, right? You're doing the same thing. You're copying. Save as is a copy, right? What's the difference between saving a copy and doing a save as? Don't know. Okay. Right. So most of these applications can actually actually have these features of copying. Even your popular PDF viewer, like my popular PDF viewer is Ocular, right? Save as, right, is there as well. I'm sure Evans has this as well. Evans document viewer. So I think they branded or something. If I was to open up a new version here, you notice that a new file, you notice that there's a feature that allows me to save as, right? So I'm copying the file. But obviously, when you do a save as, you notice that if you do a save copy as, again, because by default, it's going to try and save it in the same location, you can't. So the only option you have is for you to overwrite the already existing file, right? Otherwise, you'd have to change the location. Uniqueness is important for files, right? Okay, and then the other operation here is moving of the file, right? So you want to move it to a different logical location, right? So you typically on your computer, you typically have a number of container structures, so-called folders or directories, right, scattered around. Depending on how you are organizing your file system, you might decide to move or to change the location of a particular file, in which case you'd have to move it, right? So there's usually move command, right? Or you can cut and paste, different ways of doing this. Your file manager by default, I don't know about Windows, but my file manager by default doesn't have an explicit move command. Yeah, no, I'd have to cut this and then paste it in a different location. Alternatively, I would copy, paste it in a different location, and then delete it from the original location, in which case I would have moved it to a different location. But alas, there's some nice utility tools that are there, very nice, right? If I go here, I can use the move command, MV, right? Move command, MV, man move. I'm moving the file, or moving the file. So I'll move it to a different location, right? So I'll say MV, and then MV this file. MV it to where, though? Well, I want to move it to my download folder. Are you sure? Yes, I am. And then it's gone. It's not here anymore. It's gone, right? It's gone. Moved it elsewhere. No such file. Oh, again, I can move it from where it was. Here, move it here. Is it there? Yes, it is. It's back, right? So moving is just changing the logical location of the file, right? On your file system, essentially. Different ways of doing this. Does anybody know if on Windows you can right click and say move?
No such thing.
Oh, but observe.
No, sir. There's just cut.
Yeah, observe my but look at my file manager, right? Drag. What the hell? Drag. Move here. Ta-da! Anyway, yeah. So a different way of doing this, right? Like not an explicit move, but when you drag the file to a particular location, this thing knows that you want to move, right? I can even copy it here or move here. Should we move? I don't know. Maybe we should move, right? And go online or something. Is this making sense, right? I mean, I know this is like revision for most of us, right? But anyways, so again, you're just changing the location of the file, right? Different ways of doing this. And this is the thing with the operating system is because file management is such a crucial, it's a core functionality of your operating system. There's different ways of performing the same operation. So there's different ways of creating new bits of a file, right? There's different ways of moving a file. Copy it to a location where you want to move it to, and then delete the original location of the file, right? Cut it, and then paste it to a location you want to move it to. Right? You notice, these different variations. It's just that one technique would probably involve a number of additional steps, right? So, for instance, if you want to use a copy command for you to move the file, you'd have to copy it to the location, and then you use the delete operation, right, to get rid of the file in the original location or something. I don't know. Editing process involves you just, we said last time, you're removing some bits of the data that's encoded in an already existing file, or adding additional bits there, right? So you can edit the file by removing contents or by adding additional contents to the file. That's an edit feature. Again, in all these different instances, you need software for you to be able to do this. Because what you're doing, right, is you're going through that loop, fetch, decode, execute. Let's not forget, let's not lose track of fundamentally what happens behind the scenes when we're using a computer. That is all that's happening, right? That loop, numerous loops, fetch, decode, execute, fetch, decode, execute. Whether you're moving a file, you're copying a file, fetch, decode, execute. Whether you are creating a new meme, right? I don't know if you create memes for lecturers, right, and upload them anonymously. Whether you're creating a new meme, right, fetch, decode, execute. Whether you're updating your Facebook status, fetch, decode, execute, right? Anyway, so you can, when you're editing a file, you're adding or removing bits from the file. And we know this is true, right? If we open a file, if we open a new file, an existing file in here, sample file, observe, sample file, right? Sample file has 557 bytes. If we open sample file and remove the T, I've deleted the T. I don't know if you can notice that there was tilde there in line number 2. I want to do this. Observe, I delete T, save this, and then run it again. I now, instead of having 457 bytes, I now have 456 bytes. Why? I have removed bits from there. How many bits did I remove? I removed 8 bits, right? 1 byte. 1 character is 1 byte. 1 byte is 8 bits, right? But I can also add bits. Smiley face, as someone mentioned last time. As you check this again, because I've previously had 456, I've added 2 new characters, full colon and parentheses, so separate characters. Each of those are represented using 8 bits, right? I should have 458, right? Oh, it's 59. I wonder why. There's probably a space somewhere, right? Is this making sense? Oh, no. We added tilde again, so it's fine. You know why it's fine? We added back the T, and then we added 2 more. So if we added 2 more, it's 50. Oh no, I don't know. Maybe it's supposed to be 56 plus 2 anyway. Weird, right? Now I'm curious. Delete this. Ooh, no, don't delete this. Save. 57. Okay, we have 457. We have 457 bytes. Let's add smiley face, right? I hope you're smiling right now. So 2 more. 57 plus 2 is you're fine. 57 plus 2 is, what is 57 plus 2? 59, right? I think so. I don't know. Yes, sir.
So you said for each character it's 1 beta?
No.
For each character, right?
No, I did not say that. I said for each character it's 1 byte. 1 byte is 8
1
bits.
byte, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry, we get to
whether the character is uppercase or lowercase, it's just the same for everything, huh?
It is just the same. Oh, it gets really interesting. By the way, we discussed this. Don't worry. A time shall come when we shall discuss this. Don't worry. Let me just show you just now. Nips. There we go. A time shall come when we look at the so-called ASCII table, right? If somebody was to give you a file in binary and tell you to say there's a message in here, it's encoded in ASCII. You, ladies and gentlemen, you, my friends, will be able to know that message. You'll be able to know that message once we discuss data encoding. So all of these different characters that we're talking about, at least the ASCII characters anyway, 0 is represented using 8 bits, right? So if you look at closing parenthesis, hexadecimal number 29, and you soon see once we do number systems really that that's really interesting, by the way. Once we do number systems is that when you have a hexadecimal number that is 29, you can represent it using binary, right? So in actual fact, the computer sees the parentheses. The computer doesn't know that the parentheses exist. In the world of the computer, there is no parentheses. There's no such thing. There's no parentheses. What the computer sees is this. 2, 4, 6, 8-bit representation, right? These 8 bits. And in fact, it doesn't see these bits, right? It gets even better. It's a flow of current, where 0 represents like a low current or low voltage, and 1 is a high voltage, or 0 is no voltage and 1 is voltage or something, right? Just pattern recognition here. So yeah, a character is represented using 1 byte. ASCII character. Okay. Changes when you're dealing with different types of character encoding. formats, right? And we look at some of these different encodings that are there. It turns out that it's not just, and I know you've seen this. Yes, you have. You've seen this in Libro when you've been looking at, you've done this in Excel in 2010, in 1020, sorry, edu 1020. You notice that when you're saving a file, one of the interesting things, oh, it's not here. One of the interesting things that this thing will be able to do is, oh, God. Oh, no, yeah, well, so if you do this as save as, let's say CSV, for instance, one of the things this will do is it will ask you, what sort of character encoding do you want to use? There's a whole bunch of, I don't know if you can see this, and it makes sense that there's a whole bunch of character encodings. Why? Not everybody writes in English, hello, right? There are some people that are, I don't know if we have Arabs in our class or people that know Arabic, but I know there are people that are that use that are studying Chinese, hopefully, right? We need a lot more people like that, right? So it's a character encoding is very important, but right now we're simplifying this one character on byte thing to just ASCII encoding, right? Okay. Great. So something else we can do is we can remember introduce this notion of a name associated with the file being really important. It's really important because it sets it apart from the other files on your file system. Well, you can change the name, right, by renaming the file. And again, your file manager will have this feature that allows you to rename a file. But also, you have separate utility files that you can use to rename files. On Unix-like operating systems, you typically have the rename command, right? So you can come here and say, I'm going to go into dir, and I would say, I want to rename, I have this file called sample text file, right? And I want to rename it to, new hyphen sample file text or something. I've renamed it, right? Oh, this is, I don't know why that happened here. It's the first time I'm looking at this name file. Okay, I'll use another utility command, right? I can use the move command because move on Unix serves the purpose of renaming a file when you're moving it to the same location, right? So it's changed now. It's now new sample file, whatever, right? So anyway, you typically rename the file if you want to identify it using a different name, just like you. If you're female, I guess, you shall probably change your name once you get married. We don't know when, right? You rename yourself or something. I don't know how that works, but so you can also rename a file. Again, application software is used to rename a file, and no, application software is not used to rename a person when they get married or something. There's usually a number of different ways of a number of features embedded within file managers that allow you to rename a file. Again, this is an important, it's an important thing because it's linked to that key function of your operating system, file management, right? So your file browser will allow you to rename, right? Rename the file, right? Anyway, but also you can rename this file by using it. You can have it embedded within an existing application by going through a series of different operations. So I open a file that already exists, and then I can do a save as, right? And then rename it, right, to new, and then make sure that I delete the old file. I've renamed it, right? But I've renamed it using a different sort of pipeline, right? Where I first of all create a copy of the file and then delete the old file. Is this making sense?
Yes, yes.
Why do you rename your files? Do you rename files, guys? No. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Why do you rename files? Why do you rename your files?
Yes, sir.
When we're trying to change them
Easy
from
access.
yes, for easy access.
That's nice. Easy access is good. Well, there's an easier way of doing that instead of wasting your very valuable time.
For unique identity.
Yes. Well, instead of wasting your time renaming files, what you can do is you can plan ahead, come up with a consistent naming scheme. If you if you look at Lighton's computer system, what you immediately notice is that Lighton uses a consistent naming scheme. Every time I teach a course, I name the folder where I'm going to put whatever resources a certain way, right? Miscellaneous hyphen unza followed by year hyphen. I will never rename any files here because I sit down and I think about what I'm going to do. I just don't, oh, I'm creating a new assignment, and you're sitting there, you open Microsoft Word, right? I'm creating a new assignment, and you just save it as, you write something and then you save it as untitled 2, right? Because you've saved it as an untitled 2, you have to waste time to rename it again, right? Well, you can save yourself some time, and then, anyway, I don't know. But you can also delete files, right? And by default, again, by default, if you're using most common features associated with your operating system, when you delete a file, is moved to trash or recycle bin. I don't know if on Windows it's still called the recycle bin, but on Linux it's called the trash, right? So the contents are going to be moved to your trash. They'll only be wiped from the computer system or from the storage medium once you remove them from your trash. And from your trash, you can actually restore it, right? Now, of course, there are certain ways of permanently deleting a file, right? Like if you on Linux, if you say Shift and then delete, it will completely remove it from here, right? It doesn't even go to the trash, it goes away, right? Listen, I thought I was rushing to see if we could get to the stage where we set the stage for our discussion day after tomorrow, where we start looking at file systems. I'm just going to pause to find out if people have any specific questions.
Oh, Dr. Layton, on naming of files, them being given unique identifiers. Last time we talked about the fact that you can give a file the same name but in different locations. If you're in different locations but with the same name, then what becomes the unique identifier? Is it the unique location? What does the operating system perceive as the unique identifier in that case?
Well, it's the absolute path. The absolute path is going to be what unique identifies the path.
So the unique identifier can be in two ways: the absolute path and the name itself, depending on the situation.
The unique identifier is the file name, but it's just that it's contextual, right? It's only unique within the container structure where the file was created. The way that you globally set it apart from the others is by looking at its absolute path, relative from the file, from the root path. What other characters are used to specify where exactly it's located. So what we're trying to say here is, in the case of the new file created here, we're saying that the global unique identifier would be this thing here, right? This thing here. This. Oh, sorry. This thing here. This would be, this is how you uniquely identify it, I guess, from the relative path. Logically, from a logical point of view. Is this making sense?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any other random questions that people might have or something?
Sir, I'm not sure if you did explain it, but what's the difference between cutting and moving?
What's the difference between what?
Cutting a file and moving.
Oh, it's pretty much when you cut a file, you're moving it, right? It's one and the same, I guess. When you're cutting a file, you cut it so that you move it elsewhere, right? So you're moving it. You cut and paste. When you cut and paste, you're moving. When you cut, actually, when you're cutting, it's like you're implicitly copying the file into memory and then deleting it from its current location. Which is why, observe, when you cut a file, I'm going to cut Avengers here. Cut it. You notice that it's disabled, right? Like it's kind of like it's disabled. Well, not disabled, but it's a bit blurry, right? Because I've copied it into memory. The operating system expects that when I cut a file, I need to paste it in a different location. When I paste it, it won't be here anymore. So the difference is that with cutting, it's just that moving a file would be like one operation that just moves it to whatever location you want to move it. But when you cut it, you're copying it from its current location into memory, right? And then implicitly just deleting it. And then once you cut and then you paste, then it will no longer be available in its original location.
Okay, sir.
Any other questions? Don't cut yourself and paste yourself or move yourself elsewhere. Don't move yourself to a different course next year. Don't know. But...
So I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you compress a folder, can we classify it as having a container structure because we can also put files in it?
No, because that compressed file views the contents as encoded data. That's not you could view it as a container structure, but its data is encoded in a certain way, right? It's a regular file. Here's the thing: a zip file is a regular file.
But even though we add files in there or remove, we can't classify it as.
You can't classify it as what?
What I meant to say was, if you were to compress a folder,
yeah,
in Windows we can still add more data, maybe music, videos, or something like that. Can we classify it as a container structure?
No, but you can still add more data to a Word document. Effectively, what you're doing to that zip file when you're adding more files is you're adding more bits. When you're removing the files, you're removing bits. Here's the thing: check the file type of a zip file. You can classify it as a container structure because you're using it to house other files. And in fact, you can view the video containers that you use, like MP4, as being a container structure, because what you're doing is you're assembling together images and sound, right? But we have to be very careful how we are defining what a container structure is. Relative from our definition of the two broad categories of files, a la regular files and folders, a zip file is a regular file. And you can tell this: create a file on Windows, right? Goodness. Create a file on Windows and then try, do I even know how to zip? Can I remember how to zip using command here? Zip. Create a zip file on Windows, right? X.zip. Zip x.zip. Okay, so I've created a zip file, right? You notice this z.zip. If I ask my operating system what type of file this is, you see this? It's showing me the way that the data inside this file is encoded. Observe what happens when I check for the property of this folder. It tells me it's a directory. So whether this file that you've created, whether this zip file is used as a way of holding other things, doesn't take away the fact that it's a regular file, right? Because you're encoding data in a certain way. I hope that helps clarify things. No answer. Okay. If there are no answers, see you when you see me. Please take care. Do not cut and paste yourself. And see you on Friday. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Alright, so guys, see you. Whoever is making the link will meet